Hello there, my name is Anagov, and this is my basic guide to the Fall Guys Final Fantasy XIV event, which came out recently. This is not a god tier guide that will help you win every round, because I'm quite terrible at this game mode myself, and I've only won one round legit. However, if you are the kind of player who finds themselves consistently being eliminated on the first and second rounds, then I think this guide will be very helpful to you. The first thing you have probably noticed is that the Fall Guys event should not be played like the actual Fall Guys game. FF14's overall netcode, latency and snapshotting basically do not encourage reactive play. However, that is not to say that the Fall Guys mechanics do not have a underlying logic to them. Most of the mechanics are in the game itself, it's just that in the normal game you usually have, let's say, a boss cast bar to see when the snapshot actually takes place, or it is not as noticeable or punishing as it is in the Fall Guys event. I will be going through all the stages and all the mechanics, and they will be timestamped in the description below. However, if you forget everything from this video and have to take one thing away, the most important rule and the most underlying logic of this entire event is that whatever just got hit is immediately safe. The only exception to this rule is the yellow Exaflares in the final stage, but we'll talk about that later. So, without further ado, let's get down to the guide itself. Each game consists of 3 stages. The first and second stages both have 2 variants, which are picked at random, and the third stage is always the same, Manderville Mountain. Both stage 1s have the same rules. The first 16 people to cross the finish line qualify for the next round. This also means that there is no reason for you to rush ahead and be first. The first person to cross the finish line qualifies just as much as the 16th person to cross the finish line, which is also to say, slow and steady wins the race. The first variant of stage 1, and honestly the more common one, as well as the less horrible one in my opinion, is Gentlebean's Fever. The first mechanic is relatively simple. Cross the bridge without getting knocked off by the 3 sets of swinging axes. You may notice that each bridge is made of 4 vertical lines. The 2 middle lines have alternating holes between them. The trick here is just to pick one of the 2 side lines and then wait for the axes to pass. The second mechanic is the same concept. Whatever just exploded is immediately safe after. The third mechanic is the same thing, but now you have slippery ice floor. For the sliding section, my personal advice is try and slide towards whichever area just exploded. So basically you're doing kind of a zigzag pattern across the arena. It is quite likely that you will at some point get chain stunned by these mechanics because the snapshots are quite annoying. However, if this happens to you, do not panic. Remember, slow and steady wins the race. You have time to catch up on the next 2 mechanics, which a lot of people screw up. Also, there is a short period of stun immunity after you get stunned, so you can keep moving forward and eventually brute force your way through the mechanic if you are really unlucky. The fourth mechanic is called Acceleration Bomb. This is a relatively uncommon mechanic in MSQ, which is why a lot of people screw it up. Basically, whenever the debuff timer or the big glowing timer on your head reaches 0, if you're doing anything when it expires, you fucking explode. So when you see the big 1 on your head, just stop moving. Once you see the acceleration bomb debuff drop off, you can resolve the X's as slowly as you want. The fifth mechanic is what most people get stuck on and get disqualified from. It is temporary misdirection. When you touch the line, you will get a debuff and you will notice a clockwise spinning pointing finger arrow on top of your head. This finger will keep spinning clockwise until you do a forward input. When you do this, the finger will stop spinning and your character will move in the direction that the finger is currently pointing and will continue to do so until you stop doing a forward input. This section is a huge purple bridge with holes in the middle, just like the area before, with 2 huge ass rollers that are constantly swinging across the arena. My advice for this section is line your character up before each of the rollers. Then when you have the opportunity, go straight through the rollers and then stop once you are clear of the first one. I personally do not recommend stopping in the middle of the roller's path to change your course unless you know exactly what you are doing. What I recommend is holding down your movement input until you are clear of each roller, because you are completely safe between the rollers and have a lot of time to recenter and reorient yourself to clear the next one. The sixth mechanic of this arena is practically free. Basically, when you see a bridge spawn, jump on it and alternate until you reach the finish line. That's it. The other possible variant of stage 1 is the Manderville-Can parade. This is, in my experience, a slightly rarer variant of stage 1, and the general consensus among the community is that this stage sucks more than the other one. However, the entire point of this guide is to teach you how to play around the bullshit, so let's get started. The first part is just jumping between the pipes until you touch the glowing zone. When you touch the glowing zone, you will be inflicted with a debuff called Force March. When the Force March debuff expires, your character will start moving in the direction indicated by the debuff. Essentially, when the Force March is about to start, orient yourself so that the Force March actually makes you go forward, so to speak. There isn't too much to the next mechanic as well. This spinning stick section is basically just knowing the timings that you can cross. If you time it right, you can cross 2 circles at once. If you are a little more cautious, you can do them one at a time. Remember, slow and steady wins the race in round 1. There is no rush to be first, and getting stunned is usually more of a time loss than just doing things slowly. And now we come to the most notorious mechanic of this entire arena, which is the spinning plus swinging balls phase. A lot of people get hard stuck here, but I am here to teach you that it's actually really simple. The first component of this is the spinning mechanic itself. Think of it as your character is always moving forward, but you can slightly change the direction that they are able to turn. I personally think the best way to control your character in this scenario is to have the camera straight and then use the strafe keys to control your character left and right. I do not recommend holding down the camera angle with your mouse or controller and then driving your character around, because that way it's very difficult to see where the balls are swinging and your chances of getting clipped are much higher. Now, the second and more important part of this mechanic, which is what actually fucks people over, is the hitbox of the swinging balls. Now, like I said earlier, the rule of thumb of a lot of FF14 mechanics, especially the Fall Guys snapshotting, is that whatever areas you are seeing get hit are already safe. So when you are steering your character, you should be aiming for areas where a ball just swung over. You should never drive yourself into a path where a ball is about to swing into, because you will never make that snapshot because of how FF14 latency and snapshotting works. The last mechanic of this stage is not as free as the alternating bridges, but it is still pretty easy. If you get hit or stunned by anything here, you will start sliding down the ramp, so avoid getting hit by anything at all costs. The snowballs spawn on alternating lanes, so once something has rolled past, you can walk into that lane. It is safe for the next snowball. And the pillars moving from left to right and right to left, they only change direction when they hit a wall, so plan accordingly. If you need to slow your character down to avoid getting hit by a pillar, just release your front movement button. It is better to slide down 1 cm and get stunned and slide down 10 cm. The second round of each game is also split into 2 possible modes. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Gold Swiveller, or as I personally like to call it, the Typhon Wipeout. Basically, you are doing a obstacle course while Typhon blows air in a clockwise pattern, blowing people off who are too slow. There are also 2 minutes on the timer. However, I've never actually seen what happens when you run out of time, because just like stage 1, slow and steady wins the race. Unlike stage 1, which is a qualification system, Typhon works on an elimination system. It doesn't matter how much time is left on the clock. As soon as 8 people get eliminated in round 2, every other surviving player qualifies for round 3. What I am saying is, all you need to do is survive until 8 people fuck up and eliminate themselves. More and more obstacles will be added to the circuit as time goes on, as well as Typhon rotating faster to eliminate people who are straggling behind. But honestly, you have a lot of time. the spinning stick machine always turns anti-clockwise in a semicircle. So if you see the stick pointing towards you when you're running towards it, you should pass it on the left. If you see the stick pointing away from you, you should pass it on the right. Don't get bonked by the hammers, obviously. And for the pillars that get added over time, always respect their line AoEs. You shouldn't try to cross them, even if you think you can make it, because their snapshot is pretty bullshit. For the line bridges, don't make me explain this to you, just don't fall off. Jesus Christ, the guy is already 10 minutes long. Okay, let's move on to the other variant of round 2. This round also works on a qualification system. So the first 8 people to deliver 3 crystals, 1 of each color, will qualify for round 3. From what I can tell, a lot of people hate this stage, and it's mostly because they don't understand how snapshotting works. In this mode, when you get hit by a pillar, a fist, or a swinging axe, you lose your crystal and you have to go back to the pile to pick up another one. Again, slow and steady wins the race. It makes more sense to slowly figure out the pattern and then execute it properly, then rush forward and fuck up and lose the crystal, because that ends up wasting even more time. Just because it's a qualification system, as long as you are one of the first 8, you will qualify for round 3. So don't panic, think about what you're gonna do, and then do it. The delivery routes are split into 3 different colored lanes: yellow, red, and blue. I will cover these individually now. Yellow is by far the easiest. You have Typhon at the far end of the lane, who is constantly blowing people away at set intervals. However, getting blown away by itself does not make you lose your crystal, meaning you can get pushed back as many times as you want, as long as you don't get knocked into the swinging axe or one of the fists. You will notice there are netted walls along the path. Your movement should be move up to the furthest possible net and wait for the first blowback. After this blowback, quickly jump across the swinging axe when it's safe, and either go to one of the net safe spots on the left or right. Pre-positioning in front of the fist is optimal, because even if you mess up the timing and get blown back, you will get blown directly into a net, and that is your checkpoint safe spot. Speaking of fists, this punching glove mechanic serves as the basis for the majority of the red crystals delivery path. The red path has punching gloves as well as the stunning pillars from before, but these also use the same snapshot mechanics as before, so let's apply what we've learned. Therefore, whenever a pillar moves for the next 3 seconds maybe, its path is safe. When a fist punches up and comes down, that's where you should run through. For the second half, there is an extra pillar, so wait for the pillar closest to you to move, and then move into its trajectory, and wait for the further pillar as well as the punching glove to go up. These two are synced together. That will be your safe spot. Now let's talk about blue. Blue is by far the hardest of the 3 because it requires you to move consecutively in one fluid motion. Hesitating for too long will definitely get you hit, so you have to know what the sequence of movement is. But don't worry, I'm here to teach you. There are 2 axes and 5 pillars in blue. This might seem very intimidating at first, with 4 of the pillars moving vertically and 1 of the pillars moving horizontally through the middle. First of all, you should think of blue as a left and right. All your movement should either all take place on the 2 left lanes or the 2 right lanes. I do not encourage you to switch lanes in the middle because it means you're more likely to get clipped by the center horizontal pillar. You will notice that after you jump across the X landing zone, you only have access to the 2 middle lanes. Your window for entering the middle lane should be when you see the pillar in front of you move away. This gives you as much time in the middle lane as possible. Step 2 will be observing quickly where the middle horizontal pillar is and quickly move past that middle line. At this point, the outer lane should have moved. Therefore, the outer lane is now your safe spot and you should scoot into it. Soon after, the middle lane that you first started on will dash back towards the first X. This is your cue to move into the center lane and then quickly take this time to jump across the second X. And that's the blue lane done. Okay, 15-minute mark. Let's quickly talk about stage 3. Stage 3 is where you want to go fast or go home, because there is only one winner. Unlike the first 2 stages, where you could kind of survive and, you know, do mechanics properly, if you want to win, you have to risk a bit here. But you also need to understand the underlying mechanics, because usually one mistake will cost you a win. Let's quickly talk about the most annoying mechanic in stage 3, which is the yellow Exaflares. These things always land in a sequence from left to right, and there is a little bit of overlap between each of them. This means that you cannot use the same logic as before of whatever just exploded is 100% safe, because the edge of the old yellow explosion is not safe due to the overlap of the next Exaflare that is landing to the right of it. You can and should still move through the dead center of the giant yellow explosions, but you should try not to hang out on the edges of where they landed. I personally advise you take the right lane when doing stage 3. The reason is very simple, because the Exaflares land from left to right. Meaning to say, if you are on the right side, you can usually see the Exaflares approach in from the left, so you know where the next yellow explosion is going to take place. However, if you're hugging the wall on the left side, it is incredibly hard to see the last Exaflare hitting the right wall, and therefore you will have no idea when the next Exaflare is going to be, and it's very likely that one will land directly on top of your head. There isn't that much else to stage 3. Don't get hit by the spinning toll gates. The Yojimbo square sections are basically the same concept. Whichever side exploded is the first safe spot. Then you just zigzag between the 2 lanes, either all on the left or all on the right, while dodging Exaflares. This is obviously harder than it sounds, because there is an element of luck and timing to it as well, because of sometimes how the Exaflares spawn. This is usually where your hopes and dreams of winning die in horrific agony, but it is what it is. For the final section of the hammers also follow the same logic of whichever area just got hit is safe, because they alternate between hitting left and right. So wherever a hammer bonked will be safe to move through for the immediate future. There's also one last set of Exaflares before the finish line, so don't get clipped by that. And regarding the finish line hitbox, there have been clips running around of, you know, people getting robbed. Like, they are humping the finish line and they don't cross, and then someone behind them walks up and gets launched to the finish line. There's obviously like netcode problems there, but one of the pieces of advice I've heard is that the hitbox for the launcher is more in the middle than the actual sides. So if you are racing against someone, try and hit the middle of the launcher, even if it means moving like 2 extra steps, just because that's slightly more consistent than trying to hit the very edge of the launcher that's closest to the start point. And that's most of the advice I can give. Hopefully it helps you, but honestly, as someone who has only won once legit, I can't pretend I'm imparting to you some god tier knowledge. All I am doing here is showing you the logic of how AoE telegraphs and AoE snapshotting works in this game, and how it translates into the Fall Guys event. The event itself, yeah, the netcode, the snapshotting, everything sucks, you know, in a sense, and it doesn't really fit the spirit of Fall Guys, which is a, you know, instinctive, reactive game. When you combine it with like how this latency and mechanics work. However, instead of complaining about these things which, you know, we can't really change, this video is kind of just out there to show you that there is a logic to it. And, you know, until Square Enix does or does not do something about how the netcode works, you know, this is the best we can do. And hopefully it helps you to either win or just, you know, be more consistent in your rounds and help you farm more MGF for the drip or the emote or the mount or whatever you want. So yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you do, leave a like, subscribe, whatever. You know, support me on Patreon. YouTube doesn't pay me shit. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you. Bye bye.